The biggest obstacle standing in Penn State's way this season is Penn State.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
When I look at this game against Illinois, it is easy for me to sit here and say that Penn State should have won by more points. And the biggest reason for that was because Penn State stood in its own way. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on this show, but more importantly, be a part of the conversation down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts and your takeaways from Penn State versus Illinois. We'll start with the team overall and then get to Drew Allar and Sanders Sahaydak in this first segment, how those two players individually performed. But as a team, Penn State absolutely stood in its own way against Illinois. That was a top 20 team. That's a quality win in prime time. And that deficit should not have been 21-7. I feel like at least 13 points were left out on the football field. A missed touchdown by the offense, and then those two field goals by Sanders Sahaydak, which is why I want to bring up Allar and Sahaydak specifically in this first segment. There were just they continue to have these preventable, easy mistakes. If they clean them up, they can be even that much better. And I already think Penn State is trending in the right direction. They have all the looks of a top 10 team, but they need to continue to execute better. These lingering penalty problems. Penn State is averaging about 66 yards per game in terms of penalties. They didn't lose the penalty battle against Illinois, but they still continue to commit an egregious amount of them. And they're just things like offsides. I'm not going to criticize the referees. James Franklin certainly went out of his way to do just that, but there were some questionable calls in that Illinois game, but they still show up on the stat sheet. They still show up on the box score, and these are simple things that can be fixed because Ohio State will make you pay for that. USC might even as well. I think USC can absolutely, but those kinds of teams will make you pay for those simple mistakes. It's not the constant offsides, even though really that's the easiest thing that you can fix in anything on defense. But it's the momentum killing types of plays, types of sequences. Go back to the interception return by A.J. Harris. And Zion Tracy had the block in the back. No one was catching Harris. Harris was well on his way walking into the end zone. That was certainly a game-changing play. The interception overall was, but then that was the nail in the coffin right then and there. And yes, Penn State's offense ultimately scored, but you still left it up to chance for Illinois to try to find a way to get back in the game, either hold Penn State's offense scoreless, not allow them to drive down the field, or even hold them to 3 points. Okay, those ones that completely, or at least deflate the momentum, those can't happen. So Penn State ended up scoring, put the game out of reach, but Ohio State is going to hold you to 3 or even scoreless if you're not careful. So just don't leave it up to chance, because the Big Ten championship is a real possibility here. Beating USC, beating Ohio State even. Ohio State's the favorite, and I would think at this point in time the Buckeyes are the better team. I'm not afraid to admit that, but that doesn't mean that Penn State can't win these games. That doesn't mean that Penn State can't go 12-0 or at least 11-1 and be right there in the conversation, be one of the two teams that can get to the Big Ten championship without divisions in the conference now. But you cannot make those kinds of mistakes against a USC on the road in Southern California. You can't make those mistakes against Ohio State. And again, I think a lot of people are going to pick Ohio State against Penn State, myself included at this point. I want to be proven wrong or given a reason to change my mind about that. But Penn State's right there. The books, FanDuel, already has Penn State as a 4.5-point underdog for an early look ahead to that game. That's 4 points. They're thinking it's a close one in Beaver Stadium. So that's my point. You fix these kinds of mistakes, and you could find yourself in an undefeated season if you're Penn State. Let's go to Drew Allar, because one of my quick takeaways reacting to the game was that Drew Allar had reverted to his old self at times, and I stand by that. I think that's absolutely true. He had a fine game. He actually had the third best game out of all of Penn State's offensive players, according to Pro Football Focus. But to me, he certainly showed tendencies that we had not seen since the Ole Miss game in the Peach Bowl. Choppy feet in the pocket, 1, 2, 3, as many pump fakes as he could throw in there. That this indecisiveness, the second guessing for his decisions, and leaving probably one of the things that I think I would be personally the most critical about is Drew Allar might go through his reads a little too quickly. Allar, and this was the instance, the example that I want to point to is that Trey Wallace was wide open in the end zone. I think this was in the second quarter. And he ends up breaking away. And Drew Allar, that looked to be his first read. At least it seemed where Allar was looking. And then he shifted away because of that split second. If he had waited a hair longer, Wallace is open in the end zone, or if he just trusts his receiver to break off of that route or to break away from the cornerback, not break off of the route because it wasn't a broken play until Drew Allar held onto the ball a little longer. So it wasn't Allar's best performance, and I'm not saying it was a bad one because he completed 71% of his passes against Illinois. That is a good Illinois secondary. And Drew Allar did not turn the football over again. He played to a point where he protected the flow of the game and didn't put the football in harm's way and jeopardize what Penn State was doing. Penn State's ground game was working. And we'll talk about Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, and the offensive line in the final segment and what they've done well. They deserve it, but Allar just showed tendencies that I thought were in the past because he didn't show them against West Virginia. He didn't show them against Bowling Green. Kent State, you're not going to show that against Kent State. You're probably going to play with the utmost confidence there. Sorry, Kent State. That's just how it is. I even want to point to the deep pass to Amari Evans. That could have been an interception in itself. I get done saying that, hey, Drew Allar didn't make a turnover in this game. And Illinois had an opportunity. Instead, it was a lucky pass interference call that when in doubt, just chuck it deep, right? And hope for a pass interference. And you got that in this case, but maybe a better defensive back or a better positioned defensive back makes the play instead of relying on the referee to throw some laundry on the field. I am not saying that Allar had a bad game. He did not. He completed over 70% of his passes. Pro Football Focus thought that he was efficient. I mean, he was by definition efficient, but under 150 yards. I get the game script. What was working was the ground game with Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, but there were still plays left on the field that really could have put this out of reach and made this margin a lot bigger for Penn State and a more of a statement victory. It's good to see that Penn State moved up in the AP poll based on this top 20 win, but you could have shown so much more about yourself as a team if you had a bigger deficit against this Illinois team, a bigger margin of victory against this Illinois team, because again, we had not seen these kinds of mistakes or tendencies from Allar since Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl. Now let's go to Sanders Sahaydak, because the kicking game is unreliable to this point, and even Penn State knows it's unreliable. Missed a 40-yard field goal, 41-yard field goal, and Penn State even opted not to kick another 37-yard field goal. They decided to go for it on 4th and 3. Drew Allar had a blitzer in his face, tried to dump it off to Julian Fleming. Fleming, great effort, appreciate the effort, but he did not reach the first down marker. And that shows Penn State's hesitation to even trust Sanders Sahaydak in that moment. They even set it up on the second field goal when he missed from 40, I think it was from 40 yards itself. When he missed the second one, Penn State even ran the ball to get it in the middle of the hashes for a more comfortable setup for Sanders Sahaydak, and he still didn't make it. He still missed it. Penn State's other options are Ryan Barker and Chase Meyer. Meyer transferred in from Tulsa. He was at Penn before that. Barker's a redshirt freshman that was actually a highly recruited kicker not too long ago. So just 2 years ago in the class of 2023, was very sought after in the nation as one of the best kickers when recruited. I personally like Barker. I thought he was going to be that dark horse candidate to potentially win the place kicking job ahead of Sanders Sahaydak. Now, James Franklin in his post-game press conference did give Sahaydak a vote of confidence. Sahaydak's been around for a long time. I don't doubt his ability to kick the ball deep, but clearly accuracy is not there. and you need somebody reliable within 40 yards. That a college kicker should be able to be called upon when it's 40 yards or shorter. James Franklin did say that there will be a kicking competition moving forward. He's not going to name a starter. I do want to point out there is a reason that Sanders Sahadak was the starting place kicker in the first place and not a Ryan Barker or a Chase Meyer. Penn State, absolutely. If you want to be a college football playoff contending type of team, if you want to beat USC, Ohio State, it might come down to field goals, mistakes that were preventable, or at least the enemy could not capitalize on in terms of Illinois. But Ohio State and others will make you pay for that if you do not have a kicking game that can make field goals from 40 yards or closer. There's some, being critical here. There are plenty of positives to take away from this Penn State-Illinois game, like the defense. The defense looked much improved, and I told you better days were ahead for Abdul Carter. And here's how they did that. Here's how Tom Allen schemed it up. We'll talk about that on the other side of this break. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So it's that convenient, it's that simple, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Again, that's FanDuel.com. And if you look over at FanDuel, you can see the latest lines for Penn State versus UCLA. And as we anticipated, Penn State is a minus 27.5 point favorite against UCLA when the Bruins go to Beaver Stadium this upcoming Saturday. The total is set at 44.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them right now at FanDuel.com. Again, that's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I wanted everybody to be patient. Abdul Carter is just at his core a football player. You put him at defensive end, heck, put him even at defensive tackle. No, keep him at defensive end. But if you play him at linebacker, defensive end, a hybrid, he was on the cusp of making better plays and going back to the disruptive ability that he's always had. It was just a matter of getting into rhythm. And Tom Allen got creative with the defense against Illinois. So we knew this was going to happen. It was only a matter of time. And I still think that Abdul Carter's best days of football are even further in the season when it really matters most. Against that gauntlet of USC, Ohio State, heck, even Wisconsin. You're going to need him to show up there because that is another tough road environment. And Washington as well. I'm telling you, these teams Penn State should be the favorite, should be expected to win in most of them, but do not discredit these other teams. And Tom Allen got creative on defense with Penn State overall, but Abdul Carter specifically, because he schemed him up in a variety of different ways. And the game situation allowed for this, and that's something that James Franklin alluded to, that there really hasn't been a situation for the pass rush to just go after the quarterback. But now because the games were out of reach. So why are you going to show all of your special defensive packages when you're up by 20 plus against West Virginia? When it's a shutout game against Kent State? Bowling Green? Maybe so, but I think Penn State felt comfortable enough. And look at the second half adjustments that they have continued to make. We'll get to that in just a moment. But the game situation allowed Carter to do what he does best. And that's a little bit of everything. Rush off the edge. Rush over the center, be a quarterback spy, even drop into coverage. He was doing linebacker things, but as a defensive end. So the debate continues, and it seems the consensus when I asked about it on X, do you move Abdul Carter back to linebacker? And everybody, the consensus was, yes, he needs to be at linebacker. He's much better suited there. And I still have to argue against that. They need him more at defensive end. And it will take time, but he will continue to get better just as a natural defensive end. So he played a little bit out of position towards the end of the game, which allowed him to excel more than we've seen him this season. The defensive end depth is only slightly better than the linebacker depth, if I'm being honest. I pointed that out before, but I want to clarify that again. Carter can still do all these things from defensive end, and you need him there with Denai Dennis Sutton, Smith of Overt, Amin Vanover. And then after that, there's really not much insurance there beyond those first four. Linebacker has the same issues, but you can't just take Abdul Carter away from the line of scrimmage like that. You can allow him to do linebacker things from the defensive end spot, and that's what they did with Chop Robinson. Manny Diaz did the same thing. Chop Robinson lined up over the center a season ago in 2023. Abdul Carter is now doing the same thing. The experiment has not failed. It's just getting started. He had the best overall grade on the team. Offense, defense, didn't matter. Abdul Carter graded out at a 91 from Pro Football Focus, so it shows Carter absolutely needed that kind of game to start to get into rhythm and build some momentum here down the stretch, because overall Penn State's pass rush came to life. 7 sacks against an Illinois team and a Brett Bielema coach team where its offensive line is just naturally going to be good. It's going to be consistent. I don't think this is the best iteration of this group, but Illinois' offensive line at its core is always going to be tough to get through. And it was just, Penn State had only registered 4 sacks in 3 games against weaker competition. Now, West Virginia's offensive line is top 20 in the country. Bowling Green clearly had an initiative to get rid of the football, and Kent State's Kent State. But James Franklin is right. There needed to be more pass rushing opportunities for the pass rushing group to get going, and Penn State capitalized. They were definitely blitzing a lot more, and I feel like Allen has kept that card in his back pocket. I think Penn State's been fairly conservative with how much pressure they're dialing up. They're getting close to the quarterback with just Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant. Zane Durant had another huge impact for somebody that's a defensive tackle that is constantly seeing double teams, and Devon J. Thomas as well. That first 4 by themselves are getting close, and then the blitz is able to kind of take that pass rushing pressure to the next level. Let's talk about the run defense here. The run defense still looks elite. It was elite a season ago because they were the number 1 team in yards per carry allowed by a rushing defense. And in this 4-2-5 look, you are naturally going to be prone to giving up chunk run plays just by nature because you have 2 linebackers and 5 defensive backs. For an offensive tackle or a guard that is working its way to the second level, it's easier to pancake. Look, this is just by logic and just because of nuances of football, right? It is easier to pancake a defensive back trying to defend the run than it is a 250, 240 pound linebacker, just kind of being, on the lower side of how college linebackers are, because Kobe King and the rest of most of them, Dom DeLuca, are 240 plus, right? So this 4-2-5 is naturally going to be prone to giving up run plays, and Penn State's defense absolutely took away Illinois' game plan when it came to running the football. 34 total rushing yards by a Brett Bielema group that was clearly committed to the run. It didn't matter what Penn State was doing. They were going to run it on first down no matter what. No matter the deficit. Yes, they had to change things up, and Luke Altmaier had to basically play backyard football in the final parts of the fourth quarter. 1.1 yards per carry. That is a yard less than the mark they had it was about 2.2 from a season ago when they were the number 1 team in yards per carry as a run defense. Fagan had 64 yards, and one of those carries, he had 34 yards. So you take that away, outside of that one carry, they held their top running back, Illinois' top running back, to just 30 yards. They set the tone on first down. Illinois could not do what it wanted to do, could not control the pace of the game, could not control the flow of the game. And they just out-physicaled. They were more physical than a Brett Bielema Illinois team. And it's ironic because Penn State wasn't that 2-3 years ago. Even with Mike Yurcich calling plays, there's definitely been this shift in how Penn State wants to be offensively. They want to run the football first. Yes, they have Drew Allar and they can go quick. They can open up the passing game if they need to. But the ground game is their bread and butter with Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen and an offensive line that they clearly trust. So let's get to that, because the offensive line is playing above expectations and deserves a lot of credit for what they've done thus far. We'll talk about that coming up next. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. You got to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks, and that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out all of the fluff, so you can only see incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. And I have the tickets for Penn State versus UCLA on Gametime pulled up in front of me here, and you can see the top deals right in front of you when you go to the game. There's a super deal here. If you want 2 tickets to Penn State versus UCLA, lower sideline on the west side of the stadium, $134 a piece, and that's all in pricing with the fees already factored in, so there's no second guessing, there's no wondering what other costs are coming in behind. If you want the cheapest tickets that are available in the upper deck on the north side of the end zone, $70 a piece, all in pricing with the fees included. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create that account and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. The offensive line deserves more credit. I've been critical of them in the preseason. I said this group was one of the ones that had a lot of question marks around it. You lose an Olu Fashanu, a Caden Wallace, a Hunter Norzad. Your only returning consistent starter is Sal Wormley. Yes, you have JB Nelson, but Anthony Donko, what can he do? You bring in Nolan Rucci. Drew Shelton good his freshman year, but we haven't seen a lot of him since, and now he's a full-time starter at left tackle, replacing the 11th overall pick in the NFL draft to the New York Jets. How was this going to go? Well, it's going pretty well. 5.4 yards per carry against an Illinois team. 2 sacks allowed. Those are really good results against the Big Ten opener and a top 20 team. This is an intense group too. I want to point out what I saw on the sideline. So media are allowed from the press box to go down for the final 5 minutes of any game. And I'm standing on the sideline, and this is after the game-sealing touchdown. They are absolutely fired up. They are all energized. They are loud. They are proud. Nick Dawkins leading that emotional charge. You can see now why he's a captain. You can understand it. He has them, even though the job is finished, Penn State is on its way to victory, 21-7, and they're still motivated. They're ready to go. It looks like they're ready to go back out there and punch Illinois if they needed to, if they got the ball back on a quick turnover. Even with just a couple of minutes in the game, you can let off the gas, and Penn State's offensive line had me ready to run through a brick wall, just the way that they were fired up after that last touchdown that they scored late in the game. This group is playing better than expected. I thought, and there have been some hiccups along the way. West Virginia was a work in progress. Bowling Green, you would have liked to have seen better performances, but they did good. They played well enough. Same thing with Kent State. There were some things that they could fix, but they played well. In this Illinois game, I mean, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen were so close to each of them having 100 yards. Nicholas Singleton ends up with 95 and Katron Allen goes over the 100-yard mark, but that is a testament to the offensive line. I will say this, Illinois will not be the toughest test or close to it. I will say that Illinois is the toughest test to this point, but there is still a wide gap between the Fighting Illini defensively, the defensive line, the front seven, versus Ohio State's defensive line and the front seven. That's the barometer we're going off of here for Penn State's offensive line, is that future matchup. USC is going to be in that same range too. That's going to be a tough test, but I think Penn State's offensive line is positioned to go up against a USC front seven. Time will tell against Ohio State's front seven, which has a lot of NFL talent to it. So I want this group to continue to prove me wrong, because I didn't know how much future NFL talent was on this group. Drew Shelton's getting better week by week, and they were able to continue the success despite being down a Sal Wormley at points in the game. Same thing with JB Nelson. Penn State's offensive line has a lot more depth that people haven't talked about enough. I've said, hey, I have some questions about this group, but one thing that they do have is a lot of depth, and that showed up against Illinois as well. Let's finish with Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen, because James Franklin has anointed these two as another one of the best position, I have to say players, because it's both of them. He called them the best running back duo in the country. Tyler Warren's the most complete tight end, the best tight end in college football. James Franklin is adamant that Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen are the best two running backs, the best running back duo in the country. And they're up there. They're certainly top three. They are top three easily. If you're going to get into a national debate, not everyone's going to take Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen. It's easy to, when you talk about them, you get to see them in games live, and it's easy to agree with that. In my opinion, the only other running back duo that is in this conversation as the best running, as the two best running backs together, the running back pair, is Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson at Ohio State. And the only reason for that is that Quinshon Judkins down at Ole Miss transfers up to Ohio State and creates this formidable duo. All four of those running backs are going to the NFL in the future. That's all I have to say. And what order is yet to be seen. But I like what Nicholas Singleton has become as this complete all-around tailback. And Kaytron Allen, I mean, is playing pinball. Linebackers, defensive, he loses weight. He goes from 220. He was the biggest running back. Nicholas Singleton is technically the power back because he weighs more than him at 226. Kaytron Allen lost weight and hasn't missed a step as Fat Man. He still lives up to that moniker because guys will literally just bounce off of him. Nicholas Singleton, and I want to talk about him as an all-around back because he is exceptional in pass protection. He has gotten better as a receiver. He is a power back when he needs to be. When he came in as a true freshman, speedster, that lightning player, you just get him the football in open space and let him go. But that's what everyone thought Nicholas Singleton was the home run hitter. But now he is your complete back, and he can do so much more. You can bring him in pass blocking situations. He can handle 20. If Kaytron Allen if it was just one of them, if they had to be that main tailback on any other offense in the country, they could handle the workload of 25, 30 carries a game and not miss a beat. Singleton and Allen are able to complement each other, and they allow themselves to be the best versions of themselves because they are in this offense together and not separately. So I agree with James Franklin. I will say, I promise this isn't a pro Ohio State show, but that, right? Let's be honest about that. I talk about Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson. I do believe that is the other best running back duo in the country. There's not another one that comes to mind between Singleton and Allen and Judkins and Henderson. Ohio State is the giant. Okay, can you get past Ohio State? Because then this season can really be magical. There's an opening here. It's not just clear cut and dry as far as everyone thought it was going to be Georgia and Ohio State in the national championship game. We saw that is not the case. There is an opening here, and Penn State is in control. I'm going to bring this full circle. Penn State is in control of its own destiny. Prevent the preventable mistakes. Stop the preventable mistakes. Don't be your own worst enemy. And you can defeat a USC, you can defeat an Ohio State, and get into the Big Ten championship. That is a realistic possibility, and I've always said it's a possibility, even though I have my doubts. I want to see how they do against USC. I want to see how they do against Ohio State. I'm not saying they can't do it. They absolutely can. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. A lot to unpack here in the takeaway episode from Penn State's win over Illinois 21-7, a top 20 victory to open up Big Ten conference play. I want to know your thoughts. Be a part of the conversation down in the comments section. Please leave a like on this episode. Share it with friends and family. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. And again, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, you got to check out Locked On College Football with host Spencer McLaughlin. Game recaps, game previews, all of the news and analysis throughout the week to get you ready for that next slate of college football games, going in depth to everything college football. That's why it's called Locked On College Football, and it's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.